Are you ready to get into the mechanics of this game? Wow, I said that really weird. Mechanics. Mechanic next X. I try to make that work. Mechanics. You just get in the mechanics, man.
Can you give me a cleaner segue than that?
Can you get...
Oof.
Oh, we've seen better days, Pete Boy. We've seen better days. Hello, and welcome to the Interstate Gamers Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin, a.k.a. K-Slugs.
My name is Peter, a.k.a. Duo for Real, and I'm also your host.
Well, welcome everyone to the 37th episode and the 30th game review. We finally made it, man. The big 30. I've been advertising it for centuries now.
Mm-hmm. I feel very old, speaking of centuries. 30 episodes? Holy mackerel.
Oof. But we're not done yet either. We've still got one more episode after this one for the season for you guys. So cool stuff there. We're not done, but... if you've been following along this far, you'll know that the last episode we reviewed is the iconic Ocarina of Time. Therefore, the question begs, my boy Pete Boy, what are we reviewing this time?
We're reviewing Ocarina of Time 2, the hidden sequel that no one knows about, only released in South America.
Oh, sweet. I'm excited for that game because I've never even heard of it myself.
We are going to review, actual review, TM, one of the most significant indie games of our time. It is none other than Shovel Knight.
Hell yeah. I've only heard about this game in passing, but I first encountered this particular character in Yooka-Laylee, where in the very first level, you're like, oh, what the hell is Shovel Knight doing here? One of the many random things about Yooka-Laylee that just kind of...
and then he's like, yo, 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 yo.
Yo. It's like, this is not what I imagined. But yeah. How about you? What is your encounters with this game?
I think I started really learning about Shovel Knight maybe a year or so after it was released. Its release date was in 2014, by the way. It got funded by a very successful Kickstarter campaign that had a bunch of fun stretch goals, and it was just getting a lot of good reputation. I was like, I should probably play this game sometime. 4-ish years later, here I am, having played this game for the first time, along with you, and I quite enjoyed it. There are some interesting things I think we'll get to talk about as we get into it here. I do want to give a little bit of the usual P-Willy context, though, if you'll allow it.
Sure thing, man.
It was developed by Yacht Club Games, published by them as well for the various consoles. It actually started out being on the Wii U, the PS Vita, and the Nintendo 3DS. But now it's on pretty much everything under the sun. The director of Yacht Club Games is actually the former director of Way Forward, which is known for its Shantae series, kind of a cult classic for the Game Boy Color that has been... revived in recent years. They have some games on the Wii U and Switch and probably some non-Nintendo stuff as well. But Shantae series was a pretty big cult classic, kind of like Metroidvania-ish kind of game. So this guy, the director, he has a pretty solid pedigree, if you will. And speaking of solid pedigrees, the two composers for this game, for Shovel Knight, I learned, one of them is a former composer at Capcom, and she actually worked on the original Mega Man soundtrack.
Whoa.
Yeah, which is pretty crazy, and I think that'll become more connected to this review at large when we get into it, because there are some similarities between this game and Mega Man for sure.
I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah. So that's about all the game dev fun fact context I have.
Those were some good ones, man. I learned a lot.
Thanks, dude.
So... what do you think about getting into the mechanics, Pete Boy?
I'm happy to do that as well. I have many jobs on this show, and I do them all with pleasure. The mechanics in general. So, as I said a few seconds ago, it's pretty similar to Mega Man in some ways, and the gameplay and the overall mechanics and game flow is definitely one of them. It's definitely a 2D side-scrolling platformer. It's pretty simple as far as controls go and the different things that you can do as Shovel Knight, but we'll get into that in detail in the gameplay section. You travel across this world that's on a map, kind of like Super Mario Bros. 3. There's another, retro game connection for you. And you go around and you defeat these bosses in a kind of flexible way. You have to defeat a couple before you can advance to the next portion of the map. So there is some choice, and if you get frustrated on one level, you can just go to the next one, do whatever. But there's also some villages and challenges, like kind of bonus areas, and other encounters on the map as well. So there's always kind of some stuff going on the map. Mm-hmm. But it's pretty straightforward, really. It's I would say just like pure platforming action at the heart of it all, but with some fun gameplay twists that we can talk about here in a sec. Yeah,
I agree. And you don't have to play against every single knight, right?
I thought that you did, but I kind of was... my goal was always to do that, to defeat all of the main levels, so I wasn't really paying attention to if I actually needed to or not.
Yeah.
So fact checkers out there can confirm whether or not you need to actually face all 8 of the knights before you fight the final boss.
Right. Well, I guess I'll just kind of jump right into the gameplay. I'm not going to lie. Starting out, I did not really like the mechanics. I believe I even told you that. They didn't feel... At the very start, I was like, man, this is it? Like, this is all I got to work with? There wasn't really a lot of explanation to the mechanics. Even though there were very little, things to, perform, right? You jump, use your shovel, and then the one I didn't understand though was the one where you jump and you do your down aerial, where basically you just hold down and you can hit enemies that way and also jump off of them.
Yeah.
That wasn't explained at all. Also the fact that you could save the game through those
checkpoints,
gumball machines. Yeah, the checkpoints. They look like gumball machines with fire in them. Lanterns.
Yeah.
Lamps, whatever you want to call them. But basically, I was like, ooh, what are these? Is this something I could break? And I kept breaking them to where I couldn't spawn.
Yes.
Spawn from them. So, that wasn't explained at all. But once I started figuring things out, and as the game progressed, I actually grew to like the mechanics more. It made more sense that your initial powers and moves weren't that great. And as you progressed and unlocked other relics, basically powers, and other shovel moves to help you in your adventure, it made sense those things weren't as good as some of the other powers that you could use that helped you out in certain situations. So I thought that was really nice because it was you felt upgraded, and as you progressed, you felt stronger and better. Not only that, but you're used to the movement a little better.
I agree.
Yeah.
I felt a similar way as you did, which kind of reminds me of the way that I felt about Yooka-Laylee as well. But this game, I think, did a better job of it than Yooka-Laylee because, it's not really broken in the way that Yooka-Laylee can be at times.
Yeah.
But Yooka-Laylee, I definitely did not like the way the game felt at first, and then I liked it more as I played. But Shovel Knight, I liked it from the get-go, and then liked it even more once the game starts opening up for you, with the power-ups, with the additional shovel moves. I do kind of want to mention the little down aerial thing, because I think it's one of the more interesting choices that they made. So you activate your little bouncing down aerial move by just pressing down while you're in midair, and you don't have to hold down. You can just press it, and then you will stay in that attack position, I suppose, until you either land or you do a midair swipe with your shovel. So when I first learned that, I would try to stop doing my down air, and then I would think, why isn't it stopping? I let go of the down button.
Yeah.
Eventually I figured out how it works, and it kind of works out to your favor because there are some parts of the game that rely a lot, just little chunks of level where you will have to go around bouncing on things, and it helps to not have to be holding diagonal down the whole time. And I think it's cool how they kind of made a little change like that really was a good quality of life improvement once you learned how it actually works.
Yeah, I actually didn't like it too much. I'll be honest, because there was times where it would get me in more trouble than and they even kind of designed the level to where it would. If you were just holding down or you didn't pay attention, you would kill yourself because you're bouncing and the rocks would kill you. So I
kind of liked that though. That's kind of what I liked about it. I like the fact that they made you more. This game, I think, keeps you very conscientious about your movement, because the jump also, you don't jump very far. And the game, sometimes in negative ways, I think emphasizes that, but other times I think it works in the game's favor.
Yeah.
But yeah, between that and the down aerial thing being counterintuitive, it definitely does make you like pay attention more to what your character is doing, like on a more micro level, I think.
Well, even like fighting bosses, you're like, oh, I could kill myself accidentally. And it's like you're so focused on the boss that, like, especially the end, right? You're just like, oh, I got to remember to swipe my shovel or else I'm going to lose my ground here. But I don't know. I didn't like the jump either because it wasn't very far. And then like he just stopped abruptly in midair, which is a very old style of jumping, kind of like old Super Mario Bros. You don't have any aerial drift. So it's kind of just like, you just felt like jumping felt so clunky. It just felt so up and down and you hardly went in anywhere. So it was kind of weird.
I will say for the sake of the fact checkers out there, I'm pretty sure that that's more of a Mega Man type of thing.
Okay. I wasn't actually sure. Yeah.
Yeah, Mega Man definitely has that hard stop and start aerial drift thing.
Yeah, this one's super abrupt. It's like as soon as you let go, you fall straight down.
Yeah, I think I can see how that type of treatment wouldn't be to everyone's satisfaction. I do kind of like how different games handle it differently so that not every game feels the same.
Sure.
But it's definitely like valid to have preferences. And for me, I still prefer the Super Mario World #2 greatest game of all time controls and like game feel over this. But I definitely appreciate the slight change in like the way you play the game that it encourages.
Should have been more like Celeste. Why can't games jump more like Celeste?
Yeah, interesting, because Celeste is also a very critically acclaimed indie game that takes some, not nearly as much retro inspiration as Shovel Knight does, because Shovel Knight is like very, very much, 8-bit plus kind of thing, which I probably should have mentioned earlier. Shovel Knight very much like kind of an updated 8-bit style game, and that's very clearly what they're going for.
Yeah. I would say the game reminds me more of Cave Story than it does Celeste.
Yeah, it's very pixely still.
Yeah.
And yeah, kind of a similar game to Cave Story. I would say if you liked one, you might like the other.
Yeah.
I think that would be pretty safe to say.
I was actually talking to Katie and we were, I was saying, despite them being similar, I think I'd rather play Cave Story in terms of gameplay, like just how the game feels. It feels a lot better. And she kind of agreed because she played a little bit of the Shovel Knight co-op with me, and she got pretty frustrated with the jump because it wasn't easy to place her character.
Yeah.
So she just kept dying over and over and over again. And so she's like, I'll just watch you play. So I think that's one thing that could be criticized here. It might have a lot of trouble with people who aren't as, they don't play video games as much, or video games that require a lot of accuracy like that.
Yeah.
We're seasoned vets, obviously, not to toot our own horn, but we play video games for the sake of fun and knowledge and
integrity
and honor, and not many people do. So it might be hard for people to get into it, at least newcomers.
I agree. I do think that overall, I was really happy with the level of difficulty. I think a huge part of this is the fact that there are no game overs.
Yeah.
Your punishment for dying is losing some amount of the treasure, like the gold, if you will, that you collect throughout the course of the level. But when you lose it, it floats up in these little bags that you can collect on your next run through. It's a pretty mild punishment, and you never have to start a level from the very beginning, which is a huge frustration when I was playing Mega Man X, for example. Like, that game is very difficult in the way that, you only have a certain number of times before you're booted back to the beginning.
Yeah.
Shovel Knight is not like that, and
thank God.
And even so, like, it's just not as difficult on its own. Like, the platforming isn't as precise, the bosses aren't as crazy. Like, things are just pretty reasonable, I think. And I never felt too frustrated. I never felt like I needed to step away from the game and like come back to it later.
Yeah.
I was just kind of able to play through it. And I mean, I think I'm a pretty good, platforming game player because that's what I grew up on. But I feel that many, gamers who enjoy this kind of game would probably feel a similar way that I do, unless your experience was totally different.
Yeah, I agree as well. If you like 2D platformers, you like Cave Story, you like Celeste, you're probably going to like this game. This I would say this game appealed to me in a different sense that I'm going to mention later on. But definitely over time, I grew to like it a lot more, especially when I got to utilize different powers. It wasn't just jumping on platforms and then making variations of harder jumping mechanics when the jumping mechanic already I didn't like. So
yeah.
I'm glad it wasn't the only point of emphasis of the game. And yeah, I do really like the that you can have the opportunity to get your money back. And then you could also get an armor to like soften the blow, and which is the armor I used the entire time. I don't know about you.
I used that one for a good chunk of the game. That's the red one, I believe.
Yeah.
But then I started using the silver one, which whenever you bounce on an enemy twice, you immediately get a charged shovel swipe available to you.
Yeah.
Which I found was really, really good for the bosses, especially in the later part of the game.
Yeah. I thought about getting that one, but I was like, I don't want to lose my money.
I do want to briefly talk about the items. I think one interesting thing is that for the most part, I feel that they're quite optional with the exception of a few of them. Like there's one that sort of lets you fly across small distances, and I think that one may be literally required in some later areas, but I'm not too sure. But for the most part, I played the game hardly using the items at all. And they felt just kind of not important to me, but I did appreciate them being there.
I think that was required, and I'm not too sure, but I think it was only required on the optional levels, if that makes sense.
I think you might be right.
But you didn't have to beat those levels. But yeah, I didn't get all the relics. Did you get all the relics?
I did, yeah.
Oh, nice. What do you have anything left for the gameplay? Because I kind of talked about everything.
I have also talked about everything.
Cool. Let's give it a rating then. I'll start out and I'll say that I gave it the double 88.
88. Dang, you actually gave it higher than me. I gave it an 85.
Oh,
I would not have expected that.
I actually wouldn't have either. I came to like it more and more, and I know starting out I probably would have given it something more along those lines. But to that effect, you either give it an 85 or a 90, so it's kind of in the same range.
Yeah. I didn't love the gameplay as much as a game like Celeste, and granted they're pretty different games,
right,
besides some surface level stuff. But yeah, I think there are some like game feel elements that could have been improved. Really, I was thinking about this point before we started recording, and I want to mention it briefly. And it's about the jump thing. And there are some parts of the game where you have to like walk or run to the very edge of the platform and then jump to make it to the other side. And like, make sure that you're holding down the jump button to get the maximum vertical height as well.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I just think that's not a fun type of challenge. Like, I would rather be challenged in terms of paying attention to other things on the screen or like timing, or, well, I guess this is timing, but just that particular thing of like, oh, for this jump, you have to jump from the last possible pixel and make sure to hold your jump all the way down. Like, I just don't like that.
Yeah.
And there's some parts of the game, they're not frequent, thankfully, but some parts of them do exist. And that's just like a really dumb frustration that nags at me. So
yeah,
if that didn't exist, I think I would have given it a 90. But even though that's a pretty small thing, I think there's just a few other little like optimizations here and there.
There are for sure. I thought the same thing about some particular areas. I think they focused on it being too precise with their platforming, especially towards the end. It was just kind of like, okay, come on, like this is like intense platforming. I don't want to just jump around. Like, I get jumping's a big mechanic, but like, I was just like, come on now. Like, I just want to go.
Yeah.
So it kind of destroyed the pace a little bit, but I get what you're saying. There are some areas where it's like, this is way too precise. Like, why is this, Anyway, moving on to everyone's favorite section, aesthetics. So visuals, Pete Boy, why don't you hit us up with those visuales?
Absolutely, my dude. So yeah, 8-bit plus is the quickest way to possibly describe this game, I think.
Right.
I think it does a pretty faithful job, with some exceptions of recreating that NES type vibe. The biggest like non-faithful elements, I guess you could say, are the color palettes.
Yeah.
Back in the NES era, like games could only display so many colors on screen at a time, probably like 8 or even fewer maybe. But nowadays it's not a problem, so that's like one way in which they differ. And also a few little like special effects and like camera shaking things here and there. But otherwise, like, it looked very, very charmingly like an NES game with animation styles that sometimes were detailed and sometimes not.
Yeah.
In a way that felt actually pretty authentic, despite the inconsistency, or probably because of the inconsistency.
Yeah.
And even the amount of detail in drawings, like some of the backgrounds were kind of plain, but some of them were really detailed. And then the sprites and the other objects in the foreground were like kind of a medium level detail, like definitely something reasonable that you could probably have seen back in the day. And I'm not an NES expert, and I don't think you are either, just from what I know about our gaming pasts. But it does a pretty good job at evoking that. And I think it's really, really pretty.
Yeah, I actually wrote that it's like a very old classic NES, SNES feel. So it's like, it kind of has a mixture of both elements in there. So it was like inconsistent at times as to what it wanted to be in terms of visuals. But it did look, it was nice at some times, and it was like, oh, this is really visually pleasing.
Yeah.
All the levels felt different, which, is something we talk about a lot. Your environment and the levels being different, being unique. It doesn't feel like you're in the same area the whole time.
Yeah.
And also the levels being immersive, where you feel like you're in a different area. Those are all good things that this game accomplishes. I wouldn't say that it's like the most beautiful game ever in my eyes, but it definitely accomplishes the feel that it was going for.
I totally agree. One thing I often talk about with games like this is how easy it is to quote unquote read the level, like the background versus the foreground.
Yeah.
I do think this game struggles with that at times. There are some environments, and I'm not sure I can name them off the top of my head, but like some of the darker, more indoor type levels, sometimes the background will look kind of like the foreground or vice versa, which can be a little tricky. And sometimes there's like water or rain effects, especially near the end of the game, that are just very, very bright and animated and detailed. And it kind of makes it hard to see what you're doing, which might have been part of the challenge, but also just feels like kind of a, what's the word?
Gimmick.
Kind of like an oversight. Like, oh, we made the background too pretty and too... It's like playing on Final Destination and Smash Ultimate.
Yeah.
Or Smash 4. Like, there's so much shit going on. Not quite that bad, but it's just like one kind of nitpick that I have at some times, not the whole time.
On that topic, could they not do the lightning thing? Like in the level, could they please just not? Like that was so dumb. I was like, really? I can't see at all, and I'm just waiting on these flashes of light to do something.
I'm sure that mechanic was really cool when it was first invented like 25 years ago, but
Right.
It's not great. I mean, I think a good example of, or like a better way to do that, is the Donkey Kong Country Returns like sunset levels, where you can see just all the silhouettes all the time. So it's not really like a gameplay challenge, it's just a stylistic thing.
Yeah.
I think that's a cooler way to do it.
Yeah, there's some areas where it's like completely dark, and you're like, okay, I'm just having to navigate, and I can only see the outline of them, or I can't see it all, and I'm waiting on the flash of light to just happen. I'm just like, but somehow I made through it. So
yeah, and that's the type of challenge that these older games that this is styled after would throw at you. Like they were not shy about doing stuff that you might call bullshit, or even I might call bullshit. Like I didn't struggle with it too much, but it's not really the most fun type of challenge by a long shot.
it's not fun. Yeah. While it might go into gameplay a little bit, it was a visual effect they used. But yeah, it was very charming in a way, to go back to that. It had like this feel that was like old school, but at the same time, I don't know, it felt very warm and inviting, like this world that you're in. Like it felt like, like, man, I really like this universe they've built for Shovel Knight, which I didn't expect from this game. I didn't expect there to be all this stuff in the game.
Yeah.
So kind of cool. I thought it was just going to be level after level, and I was going to, but having the overworld and like the other places that you could go and talk to villagers and stuff, and them having personality, and you can visually see like them dancing and stuff like it just had a certain charm to it that was really nice.
I think the character design in this game is really strong.
Yeah.
And especially the other knights, the Order of No Quarter, they are called. I thought their designs were all really, really cool. Probably the best designs in the whole game were those 8 characters, which makes sense because they're, main villains. But they were all very, very different from each other, and they all kind of like matched their environments in a very cohesive way.
Yeah.
And they had personalities as well, which we can talk about maybe in content. but their designs I thought were fantastic.
Yeah, I like the townspeople. They're my favorite.
Yeah, I like the horse person and the deer lady and the people like in the bar underground that are just kind of chilling, and one of them's like the kind of like moping girl in the corner who plays a mini game with you, and she's like, "Oh, fine, go ahead."
Yeah, sure, you play this thing. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
I love the cutscene of King Troupple.
Oh my gosh, yes. But it kind of
little dancing scene.
It kind of lasts way too long, but yeah, it was pretty nice.
That's like the most NES thing ever, I feel. Like those animations and the way that little dance thing, that just felt very, very NES to me in a good way. It was kind of long, but you only have to watch it once.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you got anything else for visuals?
I do. One more thing, which is that there's a neat little option in the visuals, section of the option menu that I believe enables you to disable some of the more jarring visual effects in the game. Actually, that crazy like green rain thing I mentioned is not one of those, and I saw a Reddit post where someone requested that they have a feature to turn that down because of their epilepsy, and the developer was like, "Yeah, we'll definitely like look at that in the future because we didn't think about that particular thing." This option, which I haven't used because I don't really have the need for it, does tone down some things like that. Maybe not the example I just said, but other things in the game for sure. And I think that was a really cool touch on their part to like. Because, like playing video games, if you have any sort of epilepsy, can definitely be a hit or miss sort of thing, from what I understand. And for them to take that extra step is really cool.
Yeah, that is really cool. Good on them, Yacht Club Games.
Yacht Club.
Well, if that about does it for you, why don't you go ahead and give your rating for Visualis?
My score for Visualis is a hot, fresh 9T.
9T, okay. I went on the lower end of that, and I said 83. Don't think it's too strong, but I think it's solid and does the job, and it's charming. So I thought that score was very indicative of what I thought about it.
I agree. It wasn't mind blowing, but it's kind of hard to be mind blowing if you're sticking to the 8-bit plus thing so much. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Well, moving on to the audio. I will say that the audio is fire. The soundtrack is bumping.
Bangers.
The sounds of the games are rocking. I love everything about the audio in this game. It's really good. And knowing that fact that you told us earlier that the composer is one of the composers from the Mega Man game, it makes sense now. But man, I really loved the style of music of this game. I know I'm pretty partial to the chiptune style music, but I still think this game killed it. I think it fit with the game perfectly, all the nuances of all the sounds. I mean, it's a really good game in terms of audio. I
agree, man. I do think this music is better than the music from Mega Man X, which I'm saying mostly in case our good friend Matt is listening, because I'm not sure what he'll think of that comment. Actually, I'm not sure if he's played Shovel Knight.
He needs to.
Yeah, the songs are really well composed as well. It's not just the chiptune aesthetic that makes them good. It's like the actual writing of the music. I found it to be very interesting. It sounded very, and again, I'm not an NES or 8-bit era expert really, but it sounded quite faithful as well. But it sounded like they were definitely taking full advantage of what that type of sound chip could do back in the day and really incorporating it fully and thoughtfully into the music. And also the sound effects. I do think the sound effects, of course, are not necessarily interesting because they are, like limited by by the style that they're going for. But they were still very satisfying. And I especially love like when they try to do ambient sounds like crickets chirping and it's like and like the sound of the wind, like that white noise, like
yeah.
I thought there's something about that sound in particular that I just love. And like I want to use it in some of my music someday because it's just such a cool sound. Maybe not the most like revolutionary sound effects because again they're working on this template really, but I think they did an amazing job and the music is straight banging fire. I agree.
Yeah, I think I have some nostalgia for the sounds of like kind of like that stuff because I love those sounds like Pokemon sounds like from like Gen 1 and 2. Man, those get me every time. And it's kind of cool because that kind of game is being made in a modern era where they can do like 50 different songs and sounds and like you wouldn't be able to fit all of that into NES or SNES cartridge back in the day. So it's kind of like you get all this great music that goes along with this game, and it's really cool to see.
Yeah, it doesn't suffer from the limitation of the sound chip only being able to play like 4 notes at a time. Because like that's a problem that just plagues all these old games. Like Pikachu will make its cry, and then the bass line of the track will cut out for like 5 seconds. And in this game, of course, you don't have that problem. So that's a good way in which it wasn't 100% faithful for sure.
Yeah, there's a YouTube video out there that goes in depth of how they did Pikachu's sound and how they made it sound as good as they possibly could. It's a really good watch. If any of you are interested, I'll post the link to it on the Twitter. But anyway, are you ready to give your rating for audio?
I am, but since you started off, I will let you go first.
All right, you're going to be quite surprised with this score. I think I gave it a 98.
Dang, dude. I'm not so surprised given how you framed it.
Yeah.
And your nostalgia for that type of sound. You have more nostalgia for that than I do, actually.
Yeah.
Because I grew up with like the SNES and no Game Boy. I did not have a Game Boy for a long time. Anyway, my score is a 95.
Huh.
So not far behind. Just short of perfect, I think. I'm not sure what could have made it perfect, but I think there's just a little special spice.
Yeah, you know? I kind of agree. Nothing will compare to Ocarina of Time, as we know.
I agree. But also, I think I'd be down to listen to this music like in the car, you know, just to get myself pumped for the work day or for a night out or whatever. It's quite fire.
We still sometimes listen to the Cave Story music. Anyway, moving on to everyone's perhaps favorite section, Cone Tint.
Cone Tints.
So, Pete Boy, why don't you hit us off with the last section?
Absolutely. So, of course, before I started playing the game, I hit up my favorite website, who definitely does sponsor us, and they are called howlongtobeat.com. And that website told me that a normal playthrough would take about 8 hours, which felt pretty accurate to me. There's a good amount of content for sure, given the price of the game, I would say. It's not a full $60 AAA title, but I do think you get good value for what you pay for. Because you got the 8 main levels, which... they're a good length. They're not too long, not too short, I don't think. And you got, of course, all the bonus levels, and you also have like challenges, kind of like event matches in Smash Brothers, just little standalone challenges you can play for fun, which I started doing today, and they seem fun so far. Nothing critical. I feel like if I didn't play them, I wouldn't feel like I was missing a huge, valuable portion of the game. But it's there, and it does extend the amount of time you can play. And of course, you got co-op, which. Is there anything you want to talk about since you played co-op with Katie a bit?
Yeah, so we played co-op, and the fact that Katie didn't enjoy co-op too much, probably I don't have a whole lot to say. But it is interesting in that, did you play it at all?
I did not.
Okay. Well, when you face a boss, it actually doubles their health.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, you kind of have to work together to beat the enemies, and there's things just like little nuances like that throughout the game that you have to watch out for. And they get all of your same powers. If you die, it's kind of like a Mario kind of thing where like if you die, they can wait for you to come back, but they have to stay alive, or Donkey Kong tropical freeze thing.
Yeah.
So like you can respawn, but when you respawn, you take a little bit of the other person's health.
Oh, that's interesting.
So it's not. It doesn't make the game easier. I think they went out of their way to make that the case. But since she didn't enjoy really the jumping of the game, we only played through like a level. I think we beat, what's his name? Black Knight.
Yeah.
And so we didn't do too much there. But it was fun, and I think it could be fun with the right person.
Yeah, it sounds, from what you describe, it definitely sounds like both players need to be sort of equal skill, or one person just needs to be godlike and carry the other person.
Pretty much, and if the other person's dying, it's not gonna be good for the other person because they keep losing health if they're respawning. So it's actually not too great. Like you kind of do want to be on the same level, at least remotely.
Yeah.
But getting back to the content in general, I actually love all there is to do in this game. In fact, I would say that it's what got me hooked on the game. At first, I was kind of like, okay, but then I got to the town. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. And I started talking to people because I kind of like this stuff.
Yeah.
And I noticed that there's more like content to the game and like relics and things you can unlock. So I'm like, oh, this is really cool. And so I started like I started getting hooked on like beating different bosses or like unlocking different like shovel powers or looking for the next armor or getting all the music notes. I thought that was really cool. I like collecting things, so I think there's a ton of things to do in this game, and there's extra levels to play. And so I've played every level. I thought it was really cool. There's, like you said, challenge mode. You can even get an amiibo that does stuff. I tried some of my amiibos. They didn't work. So I guess you have to have a Shovel Knight amiibo.
Makes sense.
Yeah. I'm actually considering buying because they are releasing a pack of 3 this year on December 31st. So literally the last day of the year. Pack of 3 Shovel Knight amiibos will come out. It's Spectre Knight. What's the guy who throws bombs?
Plague Knight,
and King Knight. They'll all be available on December 31st. So it's kind of cool.
Hype.
Yeah, and if you get the expansion pack, you can also play as the game as different characters who have drastically different moves and like even a different storyline.
Yeah.
Which adds a lot to the game. So if you like the base game and you want to add a little bit more spice to it, definitely look into the expansion pack. I think you could just get the expansion pack if you buy the Switch version on the eShop.
I'm not sure exactly how this is distributed nowadays, because I'm not totally clear on like when these expansion packs came out. I just know it was after the release of the original, of course. But I'm pretty sure that like wherever you buy Shovel Knight nowadays, you'll get the Treasure Trove pack.
Yeah.
Which includes the base game and then 2 additional campaigns, one for Plague Knight, which I started and seems pretty fun so far, and one for Spectre Knight. And now there is more stuff on the way that has been unfortunately delayed, but I'm sure it's going to be great when it hits us.
Yeah.
We got a King Knight campaign on the way, and then we also got a Shovel Showdown or Shovel Knight Showdown, which is going to be a versus mode, which I think will also be potentially pretty cool.
Oh, yeah, that is pretty cool. I will say Spectre Knight is a badass, man. He is really cool. You should try playing with him a little bit.
Yeah. As I said, I did a little bit of Plague Knight, but I didn't want to get too into it because I was like, yeah, we're mostly going to review the base game, because I'm sure their gameplay is different enough to where like, some things we talked about wouldn't necessarily apply, or they wouldn't apply in the same way. So for those of you listening, this is definitely a review of the base game, but there's definitely some fun expansion to be had for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of like our Age of Empires review. I mean, there's elements of expansion in that, so it's definitely. I think a lot of our listeners will accidentally, like me, well, not accidentally, but they'll buy the treasure trove.
Yeah, I do want to. Speaking of like the base game, so to speak, I do want to talk about the plot as well. It's not too crazy of a plot. It's pretty standard. It opens up with a fun little cutscene about you and your friend Shield Knight, questers who would go on adventures together, but then Shield Knight got kidnapped or taken over by this like enchanted medallion that's turned her into the Enchantress, who now is kind of evil and rules the world, although things don't seem to be too terrible in the world, so I guess that's good, but she's still definitely in her tower, like, making shit all dark and spooky.
Yeah.
So you go out with the goal of, defeating her and then hopefully turning her back to her original self. And on the way, of course, you have the bosses, the Order of No Quarter, who they serve to prevent you from getting to her. And Black Knight does as well, but Black Knight doesn't work for the Enchantress. He just has his own motivation, which actually is revealed at the end of the game in a pretty cool way, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Because I think like the plot, as simple as it is, it definitely gets more interesting near the end when you learn more about Black Knight and his connection to you and Shield Knight. And even throughout the game, when you encounter the bosses, sometimes there's some banter where Shovel Knight's like, because Shovel Knight does talk. He definitely has like some personality. He'll make some reference to how the knights used to work together or how he used to work with them.
Yeah.
And I kind of wish it got into that more. Like, I wonder if there's some cool backstory that the game doesn't show, or if this is kind of all that they wrote or whatever. But I think it is more interesting the more that you play, and like more interesting than I would have expected at the beginning.
I agree. Yeah, I didn't expect it to have too much story, but it had more story than I expected. And having all those interactions was really cool as well. I think, like you said, going for the NES style, perhaps it limited the amount of interactions. But it was really surprising to see all that stuff take place. I thought the final boss battle with the Enchantress was actually lacked a little bit of creativity. I didn't think she was like the most crazy, outrageous boss.
I thought it was fairly creative, but less difficult than I was hoping for.
Yeah, maybe it's that, but
yeah. One thing that's pretty funny, speaking of final boss type of things, is that as I was getting to the end of the game, I was like, I wonder if this game's going to do the Mega Man thing where you have to run a gauntlet of all the bosses. Nah, probably not. It's not as bullshit as Mega Man. And then and this is really funny actually, you kind of crash into this like Last Supper kind of scene where all the knights are eating together, except for Black Knight because he's, doing whatever. But then they're all like, oh, we'll get him. And I was like, fuck me. Are you serious? But even then, it keeps it manageable because it gives you a full health refill after every one.
Yeah.
I mean, if you die, you do have to start over, but at least it gives you health between. And I managed to do it without dying, so I was pretty happy that I didn't have to retrace my steps in that regard. But that was just pretty funny. Like, all the inspiration it takes from Mega Man, and I was like, shit. But then I was like, oh, no shit. It's not that bad.
Yeah, I think they make it a little bit easier, too. They're not as complex in their difficulty.
Yeah, maybe so. Because they didn't want to just, like, frustrate you endlessly at the very end, because no one likes that.
It's like, really? I've already beaten all these guys. This is no surprise. And I think they knew that.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the things that, like, I didn't want to finish Mega Man for. I was like, nah,
yeah.
I'm okay. I already faced all of those people. I really liked all the content. I think it's definitely one of those short and sweet games that you can come back to and accomplish something different each time that you play it. So I think that's really cool. They even put like a speed run record in the credits. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah, it's like, oh, that's really cool. I like that they acknowledge that. I wonder how they update that. Is it like every time they send out an update, or does it like connect to the internet?
Yeah, I was wondering that too. I wouldn't be surprised if it just connects to the internet, just like without telling you.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, once every update would be like once every year at the most.
Yeah, that'd be a long time.
So the last comment I have is about the customization options, because you guys know that I love that ish dearly. So this game did something interesting, and this came out in an update I was reading before we recorded. But the ability to swap the genders of the main characters was something really interesting that I totally did not expect. And it's just a simple item in the customization screen where you have a toggle basically for the sprites gender of every character, male and female, but also the pronouns that people refer to them as. And if you like keep up with the talk about, gender identity, all that stuff nowadays, it's very much a very inclusive gesture that I thought was cool.
Yeah.
And actually, there was a pretty cool blog post I found where they went in detail about all of those main characters and like the design decisions they made. Like, we don't want to make this one too feminine, but this one could be really feminine because it kind of matched how flamboyant the male version was and all this stuff. So definitely some interesting reading, and I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I actually noticed that and was going to talk about that, but I kind of forgot. So I'm glad you mentioned it. But I actually didn't notice too much of a difference in Shovel Knight. I think I changed mine to a girl, and I didn't notice any difference from then on, so I just kind of didn't bother with it after then. So I was wondering if you noticed any differences.
Yeah, Shovel Knight, the female version has smaller horns and also just kind of like a slimmer frame. Some other characters, like the very extravagant Propeller Knight, who's like very flashy with his sword and everything. Like, because the male version is so flashy, they made the female version very like curvaceous and sexy. And so I was like, oh, that makes sense because it matches the character. But I definitely like wanted to see what the male version of Shield Knight looked like, so I went and like did the final battle with the male Shield Knight, and the Enchanter as well. The male version of the Enchantress was pretty neat to see.
Huh. I should have played with that more. It's just, I think a lot of people might have this problem too. If they see Shovel Knight, then nothing like really changed, they're gonna be like, I probably don't want to mess with it then.
I mean, it's a little tougher than games where like the sprites could be bigger and other art styles, and like the characters are all wearing armor. They have to get creative with it. And with Shovel Knight being not that big of a change, I definitely see what you mean about it. And like, being discouraging, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, that about does it for me on content. How about you?
For me as well.
All right. Well, why don't you give your score?
I gave a hot, fresh 9-0.
9-0. I'm very similar in that aspect. I gave it a 93. So we're pretty close in terms of scores here. I'm interested to see what we come out with in the end. On that note, I guess we'll do our number crunching.
Beep boop, beep boop. Hello, all you kings and queens and other royalty out there.
Guillotines.
Thank you so much for, do you say guillotines?
Yeah, it's an Aerosmith song.
Kings, queens, and guillotines.
Yeah.
It's a pretty neat title. I'm going to listen to that track, see if it's as banger as this game's soundtrack. But anyway, we're here to talk about the numbers, obviously. And I will start with a summary of mine. My gameplay score was an 85. My visuals was a 90. My audio was a 95, which means that my aesthetics comes out to a 92.5. And then finally, good old content, we have a 90. So the P-Will Deal For Real official score is 89.2.
Nice. My scores were gameplay 88, visuals 83, audio 98, which brought my aesthetic score to a 90.5. Then my content was a 93. All this together brought my overall to a 90.5. So it's the same as my aesthetic score, which I thought was pretty interesting. And that brings our IG score to an 89.8. So in terms of our IG score and where it ranks, it's at 14th out of 30.
Interesting that such a good game is right smack dab in the middle of our range of ratings.
I know. We've reviewed so many good games. So hopefully season 4 will just be a shit show of terrible games.
Yeah, shovelware. Oh, shovelware. That's a fun pun. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, that's pretty good. But yeah, no, pretty interesting. So some kind of games that it's in the area of, right below it is Metroid Zero Mission, and right above it is Roller Coaster Tycoon.
That sounds about right to me.
Yeah, I remember Roller Coaster Tycoon being up there back in the day, and now it's kind of fallen in the ranks. Some of these rankings are pretty interesting. So if you're interested to seeing what like all of this is looking like, you can go to our website, theigcast.com, and you can view all our rankings. And it shows it in a nice way, that you're able to see all the rankings and like our breakdowns of what we rated things. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Kevin did a great job of adding that to the site in a way that, for those who are detail oriented like ourselves, if you want to get into the minutia, you can definitely do that. Also, just check out theigcast.com anyway, just for the other cool stuff that Kevin put on there, because we announced last episode, I believe, the launch of our website, and we are really happy with it. And Kev is the one who was definitely driving that car there. So
yeah,
good job, Kev. And I hope that you guys enjoy the site and all its goodness. Speaking of our online presence, we have the IG Twitter account as always, the IG_cast. We have Instagram as well, which I think is the same handle, probably.
Yes. You caught me off guard with that one. Yeah.
IG is not where the majority of our efforts are focused.
Ironically enough.
Yeah, ironically enough. But if you want to see some cool visuals, you can go there as well. Facebook, we're technically speaking on there, but Twitter is really the place you want to hit us up.
Yeah.
As far as listening goes, of course, we have pretty much everywhere. So, yeah. And as always, we encourage you guys to write in any questions you might have, whether it be via Twitter or to our email address, theinterstategamers@gmail.com. If you want to shout at us, if you want to whisper sweet nothings, whatever you want to do, we're here, man. We are here for you.
Yes, indeed we are. And shout outs to all our patrons. My beautiful fiance, Katie Davis, Mallory Sutton, Ryan Everett, Seth Webb, Simon Webb, the bros, and our good boy Z-Link. Thanks for supporting us, guys. You definitely help us. You keep this podcast going, and we definitely appreciate the support. But I think that's going to do it for us, guys. Thanks for listening. And as always,
love you too.
Love you too.